In this video, I am going to attempt to explain the rather complicated concept of 武侠 and 江湖. This video is a bit different from my usual Chinese drama reviews in that I'm not trying to talk about one specific drama. I'm trying to tackle this rather complicated concept that even a lot of Chinese native people, when they think they actually know a lot about it, don't quite know about that. So if you're coming from a different cultural background and you don't speak the language, it might be even more confusing for you to understand what 江湖, 武侠, and all that is. So if you have been watching a lot of Chinese dramas, you would realize a large proportion of current Chinese dramas are of the period drama genre. And within this genre, a large proportion is the 武侠 genre, or versions that branches off from this genre, or even if it's really a serious political or romantic period drama, 武侠 is always an element that will show up somewhere within the story. You almost never see a pure without 武侠 element period drama these days. Given that it really is depicting a concept and idea and a world that is long gone and it's not even anything resemble how Chinese people live these days, it's a very interesting cultural phenomenon. So first we have to understand the word 武侠 and then the concept of 江湖. The character 武 usually refers to martial arts, refers to military warfare. So things that requires physical strength and rather bloody and brutal forces. 武 is best understood with its counterpart 文. 文's literal meaning is literature or writings or the things that you cultivate and study. It's the culture, it's the part that you don't fight. So when 文 and 武 comes together, it describes this set of attributes that is considered to be both important. If you are a gentleman, you would love to be 文武双全, which means you can write, you can read, you're very cultured, but then at the same time you can fight, you are very strong. So the character 武 refers to that particular set of things or skills or affairs. So 武侠as a genre is obviously focusing on people or characters or events that happens within the 武 realm, within the military, within the fighting, within the part that is different from 文. And 侠 usually refers to a type of person who are themselves very, very skilled, usually in martial arts, but they have some character or morality traits that defines them as 侠. For example, they are out there to serve justice when justice is not to be found. They're righteous, they're loyal, they are courageous. I wouldn't exactly equate, say, Robin Hood in the Western culture to 侠, but they do share certain similar traits. After explaining this word, I have to explain then the concept of 江湖 because they're very, very closely related. What is 江湖? 江湖 on the surface means river and lake. Jiang is river. In Chinese, we have two characters. Either it's called Jiang or he. Depending on actually exactly what river you're talking about, you're either using he or Jiang. That's just a language tradition. For example, the Yangtze River is called Changjiang, long river. But then the Yellow River is called Huanghe, yellow river. So we're using both characters. In this word, we pick the Jiang character, the river character, and then hu is lake. So river and lake, why are these two characters picked to describe a world? That basically means it's the counterpart of the existing status quo political circle of whatever society you're living in. So in ancient China, the court, the emperor, the official system, the seat of the political power is the miaotang, the temple and the hall. And when you go into the river and the lake, the jianghu, you are in the world where it is outside of that political circle. Jianghu is a very old concept. As early as Zhuangzi's time, he's been talking about this concept. It's like the hermit world that well-educated people somehow are not happy with whatever the political power are doing with the world at the time. They would retreat to. They would leave the miaotang and then they would pursue their freedom, whatever kind of life they want to live in the jianghu world. So jianghu has this innate meaning of freedom, of individualism, of not necessarily anti-government views, but more in the idea of searching personal freedom, political freedom, ideology freedom, and then not really dealing with all the bureaucracy that a established power would always have. But interesting thing is, these days when you talk about Jianghu in Chinese period drama, it's not necessarily that Jianghu that I just talked about, which is the other side of the existing political power. It's more talking about the wuxia world, and that is heavily due to a certain genre of literature that popped up in the 1950s in Hong Kong. Current particular view about the wuxia world, about the Jianghu world, really is very, very modern and recent born concept. So what you see in dramas, what you think are the ancient Chinese cultural ideal world, is actually created within the last, say, a little bit over half a century. In the 1950s, a lot of people coming from the mainland China, because of the war that has been going on within the country for so long, they all settled down in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong became a very, very robust place. It was a difficult time because China has just basically got out of the war, Second World War with Japan. Country was just in pieces, and then there was civil war, and a lot of people were just forced to leave their home. And when they ended up in Hong Kong, it created this particular culture that gave birth to the literature genre that we see today, that is so pervasive in Chinese culture, which is called wuxia. Again, like I said, it can find its origin in older literature, much older. But the type of wuxia 小说 that we are very familiar with these days, all those concepts, those words, particular language, and how the worldview is set up, is really all made up in the 50s Hong Kong. In the beginning, there was a writer called Liang Yusheng. He is really the first person who created the modern Chinese wuxia fiction genre. But later, Jiang came into the picture, and he became the definitive, the most important writer who really set up an entire genre that influenced everyone who basically came after him. He was the editor of a very influential newspaper at the time, so he writes a lot of journalism, political journalism at the time, but at the same time, he would serialize his wuxia novel on his newspaper, and those become super popular. Eventually, they turned into books, and I believe there are 14. These novels became the foundation upon which this genre got born and then got developed. Every writer who later came after somehow have to refer back to his work in terms of the concept that he builds up, what exactly wuxia is, what exactly Jianghu is, and down to how you use the language to describe certain things and certain concepts that are actually not real in our real world. If you've watched a lot of wuxia drama, you know people defying gravity. They can fly, they can do crazy things. There's the concept of qinggong, light technique, dancing in treetops and hopping off roofs better than monkeys or squirrels, or the very mysterious concept of 内功, internal strength or power, that really cannot be explained by any physical law existing on this planet. And then there's this world of different factions, sects. They have their different style of fighting, they have crazy names for their skills, and somehow there's this alliance within the Wuling, and it has its internal functioning system, it has its power structures. People fight for their names on the list, like you see even in Varna and Fire. All those concepts really are created within the wuxia genre in the 50s in those novels. And we got so used to these things these days, we just thought they have always existed, but that's actually not that true. So in a way, Jiang single-handedly, or he is the most important attributor who created really an idealistic, conceptual, ancient Chinese Jianghu world where there are people who are extremely skillful, who are out there trying to help the weak, trying to define the wrongful rule of whatever political power might be there, trying to save lives, trying to do righteous deeds, trying to serve justice. And they become so popular, so deeply ingrained in our current concept of Chinese culture that even though such people. Such organizations may never actually have existed in Chinese history. Now we almost accept them as fact. Or when we do period dramas, whatever story you're trying to tell, you almost can never run away from some concepts that came from his novels or some ideas that is related to the wuxia world. For example, in Divine Fire, it really is a very political story set in a fictional dynasty that refers to a real period in Chinese history, but it talks a lot about Jiang as well. In the first one, our male lead character Mei Changsu comes from Jiang, and he is the head of the Jiangzuo alliance. All these concepts and ideas and even language and how things work have their roots in those wuxia fictions that came out of the 1950s Hong Kong. And in the second Divine Fire, our male lead character Xiao Pingjing is really always torn between Miaotang and Jiang, between the political things that he had to deal with because of who he is and what kind of family he was born into, but then his own desire to go into the Jiang world, the pugilist world, the world where there's freedom, where he could use his super skills to roam the country, do whatever he likes, and be free. So he says this within the drama a couple of times.
无论我多想当一个逍遥自在的江湖人，我终究不是。
After 50, 60 years of its creation, this genre is still very strong and super influential in terms of creating that conceptual cultural identity that a lot of Chinese people, wherever they are, that they identify with. I think perhaps the most interesting in this whole thing is that the creation of this genre of literature is really a product of its specific time. At the time when the country just went through a lot of turbulence, at the time when a lot of people weren't assured as a cultural and historical and ethnic group what was the future. And because of all the sufferings and difficulties people were living during that period, this ideal ancient version that has China's cultural traits but never really existed in Chinese history got created. And it served this psychological almost need for people to have something that they want to agree with as their shared identity and past history. And a lot of those concepts such as loyalty to your country, your sense of justice, the belief that there is a system outside the official system, because official system, the court system, often is depicted as corrupted and very bad within the wuxia genre. So you go out and you go into the Jianghu, and Jianghu has its rules. Jianghu has good people and bad people. They fight, but there's always justice in the end that gets served. So it almost serves people's psychological need to believe that such world could exist and have existed. And there's freedom, there's good morale, there is possibility, and there is hope that they can cling on to and believe in this fictional world, and somehow it helps them to really live through the difficulty in the reality. And then over half a century later, the world is a very different place now, but those things still get passed down to the current generation and even exported to other countries. These days, in a lot of Chinese creative work, whether it's novel, whether it's dramas or films, we see different versions, or I would say the mutations of the wuxia genre, such as xianxia. For example, you'd call Journey of the Flower, 花千骨, as the xianxia genre, or sometimes mixing with a little bit Western style fantasy, like you see in Tribes and Empires. And there are different degrees and mixture of what type of wuxia you get to see, but you almost never ever run away completely from it. As long as you're looking at the period drama, you are definitely going to find something that's related to the concept of wuxia. So this is my attempt to explain this rather difficult concept of wuxia and jianghu within the Chinese literature, a current mindset, and the drama and film world. If you've never heard about the things that I talked about, or you've actually thought of them as different things, I hope after this video it has helped you clarify some of your confusions or your questions or your doubt about what exactly Chinese wuxia is. And perhaps next time when you watch a Chinese period drama, whether it's a pure wuxia drama or it just contains snippets of this world, you would have a much better understanding of what they really are and where they came from. Thank you for watching Avenue X. I'll see you in my next video. Meanwhile, live long and happy drama watching.